So this is Ernie Shavers,
yeah.
and Shavers was a bomber. That dude had just wild power.
Las Vegas, Caesar's Palace, the night of September 28, 1979. For 6 rounds, the champion Larry Holmes has been giving a boxing lesson. That long, snapping jab turning the challenger's face into a roadmap of cuts. Blood leaks from Ernie Shavers' left eye, then his right. On the scorecards, it isn't close. Holmes is cruising toward another defense of his WBC crown, and the bald, quiet man in front of him is running out of rounds and running out of chances, and everybody in that arena knows it. And then, late in the 7th, Larry Holmes makes the one mistake you cannot make against this particular human being. He drops his left hand. Ernie Shavers had waited his whole life for that half second. The overhand right comes over the top like a dropped anvil, flush on the jaw, and the undefeated champion of the world goes down flat on his back, arms flung wide, the way a tree falls. Howard Cosell is screaming into the ABC microphone. The Caesars crowd is on its feet. The hardest single puncher the heavyweight division has ever produced has finally landed the perfect punch on the perfect man at the perfect moment, and the championship of the world is lying on the canvas beside him. Here is the thing you have to understand. Men who traded punches with Ernie Shavers spent the rest of their lives trying to describe what it felt like. Larry Holmes said getting hit by Mike Tyson was like a speeding Ferrari, but getting hit by Ernie Shavers was like a Mack truck. Muhammad Ali, who took Ernie's best shot for 15 rounds in front of a national television audience at Madison Square Garden, said it shook my kinfolk back in Africa. And now in Vegas, that Mack truck has run down a man who had never so much as been knocked off his feet in his entire career. But Larry Holmes is climbing. Somehow, impossibly, the champion is dragging himself off that canvas with 30 seconds still left to survive in the round. It took 10 stories to build the man who threw that punch. 10 chapters: an Alabama cotton field, a midnight escape, a factory floor, a nickname handed down by the greatest, a graveyard of ruined heavyweight jaws, to forge the fists that just put the champion of the world on his back. The first one begins on a farm in the Deep South, and it begins right now. Number 1. A mule, a Klan threat, and a midnight run. Ernie D. Shaver came into the world on August 31st, 1944, in the tiny community of Garland, in Butler County, Alabama. You will sometimes see other dates attached to his name, but the family record, the census, and every serious obituary settle on that late August day in 1944. He was one of 9 children born to Curtis and Willie Bell Shaver, and the family worked cotton, hard, bending, sun-up to sundown field labor that Ernie would credit for the rest of his life as the true forge of his freakish strength. There was no weight room in his childhood. There was a cotton sack and an aching back. But the story that shaped everything was darker than sore muscles. While Ernie was still a boy, his father got crossways with the Ku Klux Klan over money that was owed. The accounts say it involved a debt for a mule. A black sharecropping family in the Alabama of that era did not argue with a Klan threat. They ran. The Shavers packed up and fled north, out of the cotton country and up into the steel and smoke belt of Ohio, settling around Youngstown and the town of Warren. Ernie would graduate from Newton Falls High School, run track, play football, and carry that Alabama field strength into a life that had nothing yet to do with boxing. Sit with that for a moment. The single hardest puncher in the history of the heavyweight division was, first and foremost, a refugee. A child driven out of his birthplace by men in hoods over a debt for a mule. The power came from the cotton. The character came from the running. Number 2. The hands that unscrewed bolts. Here is where the legend turns strange, and where I deliver on the promise of this whole video. The raw, physical, almost unbelievable power of this man. By the late 1960s, Ernie Shavers was a grown, married working man with a steady job at the General Motors assembly plant in Lordstown, Ohio. He was not a boxer. He was a factory hand. And on that factory floor, the stories say, Ernie Shavers discovered he could unscrew bolts with his bare fingers, bolts meant for power tools, and shift engine blocks that other men needed machines to move. The strength was simply marred. There, sitting inside a man who had never thrown a professional punch. He did not lace up gloves until he was 22 years old, ancient by boxing standards. A friend named Vincent Austin kept nagging him to come down to the gym. Ernie finally gave in just to quiet him. The trainer took one look at this thick, silent slab of a heavyweight and said, in effect, "Oh boy, we've got a champion here. We can make some money." Ernie sparred a man that first day who would soon turn pro, and every so often Ernie would land a right hand and send him pulte flying across the ring. The man told him plainly, "You are going to hurt somebody with that." He had no idea. Years later, the contender James "Quick" Tillis, a man who went the distance with both Ernie and a young Mike Tyson, tried to put the Shavers' right hand into words for the Daily Telegraph. Tillis said that when Ernie hit him, he was in the land of make-believe, that he heard saxophones and trombones, and that he saw little blue rats scamper out to smoke cigars, drink whiskey, and eat Spam sandwiches. When Tillis staggered up, he said, "All he could see was 3 of those bald heads, so I grabbed the middle head, and luckily for me, it was the right one." That is not a poem. That is a professional heavyweight describing what a single Ernie Shavers punch did to the inside of his skull. And Hollywood would one day find out the hard way exactly how real that power was. But that is a story we will get to. For now, hold on to this. The champion we left on the canvas in Vegas got there because of hands that could unscrew steel. Number 3. 20 men, 20 times flat on their backs. Ernie Shavers did not sneak up on the sport. He detonated into it. As an amateur, he went 20-6, won the Ohio, Cleveland, and Youngstown Golden Gloves, and in 1969 captured the National AAU Heavyweight Championship. He turned professional in November of 1969, and what followed was one of the most violent hot streaks the division had ever seen. He won 44 of his first 47 fights by knockout, most against nobody in particular, but the manner was terrifying. At one stretch, he reeled off 27 knockouts in a row, 20 of them in the very first round. He was billed as the Black Destroyer, and the name was earned honestly. A referee would wave 2 heavyweights together, and roughly 118 seconds later, one of them would be studying the ceiling lights. It was around this time that the most notorious promoter in boxing came knocking. Literally. Don King showed up at Ernie's house in the early 70s and asked to manage him. Ernie, unhappy with his current handlers, went with King, and for all of Don King's legendary reputation, Ernie insisted to his dying day that King treated him well and opened the big doors. His trainer Frank Luca stayed in his corner. A co-manager named Blackie Gennaro came and went. The machine was assembled. All it needed now was a big name to knock down. And in 1973, Ernie found 4 of them. And do not forget, we still have a champion of the world lying on a Las Vegas canvas from the top of this video. The biggest punch of Ernie's life hanging in the air, unresolved. We are coming back for it. I promise you that. Number 4. The night he iced Jimmy Ellis in a single round. 1973 was the year Ernie Shavers became a name that made matchmakers nervous. In February, in Philadelphia, the home turf of a slick young heavyweight named Jimmy Young, Ernie stopped Young inside 3 rounds. That may not sound like much, until you learn that Jimmy Young would go on to beat George Foreman and push Ali to the brink, and that Ernie Shavers was the first of only 2 men who would ever stop him in his entire career. Then came June, and Madison Square Garden, and former world champion Jimmy Ellis. Ali himself had tipped Ernie off. Hit Ellis to the body, he doesn't eat right, He can't take it downstairs. Ellis actually caught Ernie with a hard right early. It was the last good thing that happened to him. Ernie came back with a sizzling right uppercut to the jaw, and Ellis's head snapped, and the former champion of the world folded to the canvas, trying to rise on pure instinct, ending up sitting, then tipping onto his side. 1 round. Ernie called it the best night of his career, the night that opened everything up. A former heavyweight champion of the world, iced inside 3 minutes. That is what a puncher does. He doesn't win rounds. He ends careers in the time it takes to read this sentence. Number 5. The first time the Destroyer fell. But here is what separated Ernie Shavers from a mere highlight reel, and what makes his story a real story, not a cartoon. The same thing that made him godlike also made him fragile, spec stamina, because he poured so much murder into every punch that he emptied his own tank. If you could survive the storm, you had a chance, and a handful of very tough men survived it. In December of 1973, riding a streak of 32 wins with 31 knockouts, Ernie walked into the Garden against the rugged Jerry Quarry and got a taste of his own medicine. Quarry, ignoring his corner's pleas to box, simply slugged with the slugger, caught Ernie flush, dropped him, and swarmed. Referee Arthur Mercante waved it off at 2:21 of the first round. Ernie's aura of invincibility was gone in a single stanza. And in September of 1975, in Denver, came the war that Ernie himself would call the hardest punching he ever took. Ron Lyle, an ex-convict who had literally been declared dead on an operating table years before, went to hell and back with him. Ernie dropped Lyle in the second round, the first knockdown of Lyle's entire career. But Ernie gassed, Lyle came roaring back, and in the sixth, a right hand to the temple sent Ernie rolling on the canvas. Years later, Lyle said it best about Ernie's power. When he hit you, the lights went out. I can laugh about it now, but at the time, it wasn't funny. 2 of the hardest hitters of the golden era, and each man learned the other was mortal. Number 6. Hollywood says, "Show me something real." Now for the story I promised you. The one that proves the Shavers' power was no myth, told not by a boxer, but by a movie star. In the early 1980s, Sylvester Stallone was casting the villain Clubber Lang for Rocky III, and he wanted a real heavyweight. So he flew Ernie Shavers out to California and climbed into a ring to spar with him. Ernie, being the gentle soul he was outside the ropes, refused to hit the movie star with anything harder than a pillow-soft jab. He did not want to hurt the man. Stallone grew frustrated. "Come on, Ernie," he said. "Show me something real." So Ernie showed him something real. One short shot up under the ribs, near the liver. Stallone, in his own words, said it nearly killed me. I went straight to the men's room and threw up. That account was set down in Frederick Romano's book, The Boxing Filmography. Ernie did not get the part. The casting director, Rhonda Young, decided his soft, high-pitched speaking voice wasn't menacing enough, and the role went to Mr. T, with Joe Frazier also in the mix. But let the record show that the man who played the most fearsome villain in Rocky history got the job partly because the real fearsome heavyweight sent the director running to be sick with a single body shot he was pulling. If you love these lost stories of the golden age of the heavyweights, do me a favor and subscribe to Iron Era Legends right now, because they don't make men like Ernie Shavers anymore, and these tales deserve to be kept alive. Number 7. 15 Rounds with the Greatest. September 29, 1977. Madison Square Garden. Muhammad Ali, 35 years old and the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, against Ernie Shavers, who came in at 54 wins, 5 losses and 1 draw, with 52 knockouts. NBC put it on in prime time, a rarity, and had the judges' scores announced after every round so there could be no controversy. The whole country was watching. This is the fight your father and your grandfather remember. Ali gave Ernie the nickname that stuck forever, the Acorn. for that gleaming bald head. And then, in the second round, the acorn nearly ended the legend of Muhammad Ali. A thunderous overhand right buckled the champion. Ali, the greatest showman the ring ever knew, immediately began play-acting, clowning, waving Ernie in as if it were nothing, and Ernie, unsure whether the greatest fighter alive was hurt or hunting, hesitated. That hesitation may have saved Ali's title. Ernie later said in awe, "I timed him, and I thought he was playing, but he was hurt." For 15 rounds, these two men tore at each other. Ernie came alive in the 13th and battered Ali around the ring in the 14th. Going into the final round, according to the ringside writers, Ali was on wobbly, spent legs. His trainer Angelo Dundee looked at him and said the plain truth, "You don't look so good. You better go out and take this round." And Ali, one last time, one last impossible time, reached down and produced 3 minutes of magic, nearly dropping Ernie in the closing seconds to steal the round and the unanimous decision. At ringside sat Eva Shane, the first woman ever to judge a heavyweight championship fight. Ali won, but he lost so much. His own doctor, Ferdy Pacheco, was so horrified by the punishment Ali absorbed that he begged him to retire and then quit his corner when Ali refused. Sports Illustrated put it on the cover of its October 10, 1977 issue, Ali's Desperate Hour, over a photograph of Ernie Shavers landing that overhand right. And Ali gave Ernie the line that would outlive them both. "Ernie hit me so hard it shook my kinfolk back in Africa." The acorn didn't get the belt that night, but he took Muhammad Ali to the edge of the cliff on national television, and America never forgot it. Number 8. One punch, and Ken Norton was gone. If the Ali fight made Ernie Shavers famous, the next one made him terrifying all over again. After the Ali loss, Ernie ran into Larry Holmes for the first time, a March 1978 title eliminator at Caesar's Palace, and the younger, faster Holmes simply out-jabbed him over 12 one-sided rounds. It looked like the end. Ernie was 34, aging, and out of the picture. Then came March 23, 1979, at the Las Vegas Hilton, against former world champion Ken Norton, the iron-jawed warrior who had broken Ali's jaw and gone the distance with him 3 times. Norton was the #1 contender and the betting favorite. He decided to play it safe, to cover up and let Ernie punch himself out. It was, in the words of one writer, a fatal decision. Ernie tore into him from the opening bell, a hook to the liver, a bomb to the temple, and Norton was hurt inside the first minute. Ernie chased him down, and in less than 2 minutes of the first round, wrecked one of the toughest chins in the sport's history. Referee Mills Lane waved it off at 1 minute and 58 seconds. Norton later said Ernie's punches were like photographers' flashlights going off in my head. When he knocked me down, I was out cold. It was the finest, most emphatic win of Ernie Shavers' entire career. And it earned him one last thing, a rematch with Larry Holmes, this time with the championship of the world on the line. Which brings us, at long last, back to that canvas in Las Vegas. Number 9. The right hand that stopped time. Now we finish it. September 28, 1979. Caesar's Palace. Larry Holmes, 31-0, the WBC champion of the world, against Ernie Shavers, 35 years old, on his second and final crack at the title he had chased his whole life. Everyone in boxing knew the math. Ernie could not outbox the younger, faster Holmes. He had exactly one chance. A puncher's chance, a lottery ticket, that big right hand. For 6 rounds, it went exactly as feared. Holmes jabbed him to pieces, opened cuts over both eyes, and built an enormous lead. And then came the 7th, and the moment we opened this whole story with. Holmes dropped his left to load up an uppercut. Ernie beat him to it. The overhand right landed flush, and the undefeated champion of the world crashed to the canvas flat on his back. The first time in his life Larry Holmes had ever been floored. Here is what Holmes himself said about that punch, and I want you to really hear it. When he hit me, I thought somebody was taking my picture. I saw a big flash. He could have knocked me out if he didn't hit me that hard. But he hit me so hard that he automatically woke me up. He hit me so damn hard, I thought lightning struck. Real hard. That is the paradox of Ernie Shavers in one sentence. He hit a man so hard that the sheer violence of it jolted the man back to consciousness before the count could reach 10. Holmes staggered up on rubber legs with 30 seconds left in the round, and Ernie swung wildly, desperately, trying to finish the job of a lifetime. But he could not land the second bomb. At the bell, Holmes wobbled to his corner, where his trainer poured water over him and cracked an ammonia capsule under his nose to bring him fully back. And that was the difference. Holmes cleared his head, went back to that jab, and slowly, cruelly took over. By the 11th round, Ernie was exhausted, bleeding, and nearly defenseless. Referee Davy Pearl paused the fight, looked at that ruined face, and asked Ernie if he wanted to continue. Ernie said yes. Of course he said yes. When Holmes had asked him mid-fight why he was still hanging on, Ernie had answered, "I ain't quitting. I'm trying to take your title away." A few punches later, Pearl stepped in and stopped it at 2 minutes of the 11th. Ernie Shavers went to the hospital that night for 27 stitches. 2 weeks later, surgeons repaired a detached retina, an injury that in that era ended careers the way few things could. He had come within one recovered champion of the mountaintop, and he never got that close again. But he had done what no man had done before or since. He had put Larry Holmes on his back, and Holmes would spend the rest of his life telling anyone who asked that Ernie Shavers, not Tyson, not Cooney, not anybody, hit the hardest of them all. Number 10. The Preacher on the Door in Liverpool. Now comes the part of the story that tells you who Ernie Shavers really was. The decline was hard, the way it always is. Still healing from that eye surgery, he was stopped by the Colombian Bernardo Mercado in a fight so ferocious that Ernie hit the man hard enough to split his own glove down the middle. He lost a war to Randall Tex Cobb, who left us the last great line about that right hand. Nobody hits like Shavers. If anybody hit harder, I'd shoot him. Ernie could punch you in the neck and break your ankle. The power never left him. The body did. And the money went with it. There was foreclosure and bankruptcy in his story. And for a while, he was fighting not for glory, but for the mortgage. He finally hung them up for good in 1995. When it was over, he had fought more than 90 times and knocked out better than 3 of every 4 men who ever faced him. One of the highest finishing rates the heavyweight division has ever recorded. 23 of them gone inside the very first round. In 2003, the Ring magazine ranked him number 10 among the 100 hardest punchers who ever lived. And then Ernie Shavers did the last thing anyone expected. In 1986, he found his faith and became an ordained Christian minister, the Black Destroyer, preaching the gospel. He carried it to schools, to prisons, to a television ministry. And in his 60s, he moved to England, where the old fight fans adored him. And there, I promise you this is true, the hardest puncher in the history of the heavyweight division took a job working the door of a pub in Liverpool. Picture it. A man whose right hand had floored Larry Holmes and staggered Muhammad Ali, standing at the entrance of a British boozer in a nice coat, shaking every hand that came through, telling Don King stories to strangers, and never once needing to raise a fist. Because there was not a soul in Liverpool foolish enough to test Ernie Shavers at the door. Everyone who met him told the same story. The old New York commissioner Randy Gordon said it best. He was one of the nicest men in the world, right up until the bell rang and he tried to take your head off. He made peace with Ali. He grew close to George Foreman. He signed every autograph, gave every fan his time, and gripped every hand like a man who had forgotten how much stronger he was than everyone else in the room. Ernie D. Shavers died on September 1st, 2022, at his daughter's home. one single day after his 78th birthday. They buried him back in Ohio, in the very country his family had fled to all those years before, running north in the night from a Klan threat over a mule. He never won the championship of the world. The belt was the one thing that quiet, gentle, devastating man was never allowed to have. But go and ask the men who actually stood across from him. Ask Ali. Ask Holmes. Ask Norton. Ask Lyle. Every last one of them will tell you the same thing. That pound for pound, punch for punch, there has never been another human being who could hit like the Acorn. He was, in his own words, the hardest puncher ever born. And he was, by every account of everyone who knew him, one of the kindest men the sport ever produced. That is the championship no judge could ever take away. And that is why, half a lifetime later, we still say his name.
Thank you for watching the complete video. Did you know? Americans over 60 lost $7.7 billion to scams last year. That's according to the FBI. In 2020, that number was just 600 million. These aren't careless people. These are retired teachers, veterans, business owners, losing an average of $83,000 each. Now ask yourself this. Could you spot a phone call that uses your grandson's cloned voice, begging for help? Would you recognize a fake email from your bank that looks exactly like the real thing? Do you know what to do in the first 60 minutes after your personal information is stolen? If you hesitated on any of those, you're not alone. And that's exactly why we started The Lookout, a newsletter with one email per week. No spam, no politics. Just the latest scams explained, how they work, and exactly how to protect yourself and the people you love. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. It costs nothing. It takes 2 minutes to read, and it might save you everything.